The woman stumbled through the wooden doors of the general store in Loveland, Colorado, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely form words, and the storekeeper took one look at her blue-tinged lips before rushing to stoke the fire that was already burning in the corner stove. Helena Norton had been walking for 3 hours in weather that no sane person should venture into, her thin cotton dress and shawl providing about as much protection from the December blizzard as a paper umbrella would against gunfire. She had left Denver that morning on the stagecoach with her carpet bag, and her life savings sewn into the hem of her petticoat, determined to start fresh in a town where no one knew her name or her shame. The stage had made it halfway to Loveland when one of the horses threw a shoe, and the driver had informed the passengers they would need to wait while he rode back to the last town for help. Helena had made the mistake of thinking she could see the lights of Loveland in the distance, and that walking would be faster than freezing to death in the broken-down coach. She had been wrong about the distance. Very wrong. "Miss, you need to sit down before you fall down," the storekeeper said, guiding her toward a chair near the stove. "What in God's name are you doing out in this weather without a proper coat?" Helena's fingers were too numb to feel the warmth yet, but she held them toward the fire anyway. "I thought it was closer. I could see the lights." "That was probably the Richardson Ranch you were seeing. They are about 5 miles south of here. Loveland is another 3 miles past that." The storekeeper shook his head. "You are lucky you did not freeze to death out there. December in Colorado is no joke, miss. We get snows that can bury a horse." She knew she should thank him, but her jaw was still shaking too hard to form proper sentences. Her feet felt like blocks of ice in her worn boots, and she wondered if she would lose her toes to frostbite. What a fine start to her new life that would be, arriving in town as a cripple before she even had a chance to find work. The door burst open again, bringing with it a gust of snow and wind that nearly extinguished the lanterns hanging from the rafters. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, covered in snow from his hat to his boots. He stomped his feet on the mat and brushed the worst of the snow from his coat before looking up, and Helena found herself staring into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. "Caleb, I need 3 pounds of coffee and whatever dried meat you have left," the man said to the storekeeper, his voice deep and rough like gravel. "This storm is going to keep up for at least another day, and I am running low on supplies." "Coming right up, Carter," the storekeeper replied, moving behind his counter. "You might want to warm yourself by the fire first. We have a guest who nearly froze herself solid trying to walk from the stage road." The man called Carter turned his attention to Helena, and she felt heat creep into her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. He was handsome in a rugged way that spoke of hard work and harder living, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his hat. His coat was thick sheepskin, lined with wool, and his gloves looked warm and well-made. Everything about him spoke of a man who knew how to survive in this harsh country. "You walked from the stage road in this?" Carter asked, his blue eyes narrowing as he took in her inadequate clothing. "Are you trying to die, miss?" Helena bristled at his tone despite her gratitude for the warm store. "I did not have much choice. The stage broke down and I could see the lights of town. I thought it was closer than it was." "Those lights were probably the Richardson place," Carter said, echoing what the storekeeper had told her. "You are lucky you made it this far. Another hour in that cold and you would be a frozen corpse in a snowbank." He paused, studying her more closely. "Where is your coat?" "I do not have one," Helena admitted, feeling foolish and small under his scrutiny. "I left Denver this morning and it was not snowing then. The weather turned while we were traveling." Carter stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face. Then, without warning, he began unbuttoning his sheepskin coat. "You cannot go around in a Colorado winter without a proper coat. You will be dead within a week." "What are you doing?" Helena asked, alarm creeping into her voice. "What does it look like I am doing?" Carter pulled his coat off, revealing a thick flannel shirt and suspenders beneath. "I am giving you my coat." "I cannot take your coat," Helena protested. "You will freeze." "I have another coat at home, and I am only riding a mile back to my ranch." "You, on the other hand, look like you are planning to stay in town, which means you will need something warmer than that sad excuse for a shawl." He walked over to where she sat and draped the heavy coat around her shoulders before she could protest further. The wool lining was still warm from his body, and Helena felt tears prick at her eyes from the unexpected kindness. "I cannot afford to pay you for this," she said quietly, clutching the coat around herself. It smelled like leather and wood smoke, and something indefinably masculine that made her stomach flutter in a way she had not felt in a very long time. "I am not asking you to pay me," Carter said, his voice gentler now. "Consider it a welcome gift to Loveland. We are not all so cruel as to let a lady freeze." He turned back to the storekeeper. "Caleb, get those supplies wrapped up. I need to get back before this storm gets worse." The storekeeper was watching the exchange with barely concealed interest, and Helena knew that by tomorrow morning, the entire town would know about the stranger who arrived without a coat and the rancher who gave her his own. In a town this size, gossip spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. "Where are you planning to stay tonight, miss?" Caleb asked as he measured out coffee beans. "The boarding house is closed for the winter. Mrs. Henderson went to stay with her daughter in Denver until spring." Helena felt her heart sink. "I was hoping to find a room for rent. I have money." "There is not much available right now," Caleb said apologetically. "Most folks who rent rooms do not want to bother during the winter months when travel is difficult." He glanced at Carter. "Your aunt still has that empty room above her dress shop, does not she?" Carter nodded slowly. "She does. But I am not sure she is looking for a boarder." "Could you ask her?" Helena said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "I can pay whatever she thinks is fair, and I can work to earn my keep. I can sew, cook, clean, anything she might need." Carter studied her again with those penetrating blue eyes, and Helena had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her, past the polite facade and into all the secrets she was trying to leave behind in Denver. "I will ask her," he finally said, "but I cannot make any promises. My aunt is particular about who she lets into her home." "Thank you," Helena said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you so much." Carter collected his supplies from Caleb and paid for them with coins from his pocket. He paused at the door, looking back at Helena. "What is your name, miss?" "Helena Norton," she said. "Miss Norton," he said, testing the name on his tongue. "I am Carter Olson. If my aunt agrees to take you in, I will come by tomorrow morning to let you know." He settled his hat more firmly on his head. "In the meantime, you should stay here where it is warm." "Caleb, can she sleep in your back room tonight?" "Of course," Caleb said immediately. "I have a cot back there and it is warm enough. Miss Norton is welcome to it." "I appreciate your kindness," Helena said, meaning every word. "Both of you." Carter nodded once and then disappeared back into the blizzard, leaving Helena wrapped in his coat and wondering what kind of man gave away his only protection against a storm to a complete stranger. She pulled the coat tighter around herself, breathing in that scent of leather and wood smoke, and felt something shift in her chest. Something she had thought was dead after everything that had happened in Denver. Hope. The back room of the general store was small but clean, with a narrow cot, a wash basin, and a stack of folded blankets. Caleb brought her a bowl of beef stew and a chunk of bread, refusing her offer of payment. "Consider it part of the Loveland welcome," he said with a kind smile. "We take care of our own here, and if Carter Olson thinks you are worth helping, that is good enough for me." "You trust his judgment that much?" Helena asked, curious about the man who had given her his coat. "Carter is one of the finest men I know," Caleb said firmly. "He runs the biggest ranch in these parts, treats his workers fair, always pays his debts on time, and he has never once turned away someone who needed help. His father was the same way before he passed. The Olsons are good people, miss. If Carter says he will ask his aunt about the room, then he will do exactly that." Helena ate her stew slowly, savoring the warmth and the solid food in her belly. It had been a long time since she had felt safe enough to relax, but something about this little town already felt different from Denver. Maybe it was the kindness of strangers, or maybe it was the way Carter Olson had looked at her with those blue eyes that seemed to see everything. Whatever it was, Helena found herself hoping that his aunt would agree to take her in, because for the first time in months, she felt like she might actually have a chance at the fresh start she so desperately needed. She fell asleep that night wrapped in Carter's coat, listening to the wind howl outside and the snow pile up against the windows. In her dreams, she was warm and safe, and a pair of blue eyes watched over her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. When Helena woke the next morning, the storm had subsided to a light snowfall, and pale sunlight filtered through the frosted windows. She folded the blankets carefully and washed her face in the cold water from the basin, trying to make herself presentable. Her dress was wrinkled from sleeping in it, and her hair was a tangled mess, but there was nothing to be done about that now. She braided it as best she could and pinned it up, then wrapped Carter's coat around herself again before venturing into the main part of the store. Caleb was already up and sweeping the floor. "Good morning, Miss Norton. Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you. The cot was comfortable, and I cannot thank you enough for your hospitality." "It was my pleasure," Caleb said. "There is coffee on the stove and some biscuits if you are hungry." Helena gratefully accepted both, sitting near the fire to eat her simple breakfast. She was halfway through her second biscuit when the door opened and Carter Olson walked in, brushing snow from his shoulders. He was wearing a different coat today, this one brown leather with fur trim, and he looked even more handsome in the morning light than he had the night before. "Miss Norton," he said, nodding to her. "I spoke with my aunt this morning. She would like to meet you." Helena set down her coffee cup, her heart suddenly racing. "She is willing to consider renting me the room." "She is willing to talk to you about it," Carter said carefully. "My Aunt Miriam is a good woman, but she is also protective of her space and her business. She will want to know something about you before she makes any decisions." "Of course," Helena said, standing up quickly. "I understand completely. When would she like to meet?" "Now, if you are ready. Her shop is just down the street." Helena looked down at her wrinkled dress and felt a wave of embarrassment. "I am not exactly presentable. You survived a blizzard yesterday. I think my aunt will understand if you are a bit rumpled." Carter's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Besides, you are wearing my coat. That will count for something." They walked through the snow-covered streets of Loveland, and Helena got her first real look at the town in daylight. It was small but tidy, with wooden buildings lining a main street that was currently covered in about 6 inches of fresh snow. She could see a church steeple in the distance, a saloon with a painted sign, a blacksmith shop with smoke rising from the chimney, and several other businesses that she could not quite make out through the snow. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else, where strangers were noticed immediately, and where a person's reputation mattered more than money. Carter led her to a 2-story building with a sign that read, "Miriam's Fine Dresses and Alterations," in elegant script. He opened the door and ushered her inside. and Helena found herself in a warm room filled with bolts of fabric, dress forms, and the whir of a sewing machine. A woman in her 50s looked up from her work, her gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her sharp hazel eyes assessing Helena in a single glance. "Aunt Miriam, this is Miss Helena Norton," Carter said. "Miss Norton, this is my Aunt Miriam Olson." "Good morning, Miss Norton," Miriam said, her voice pleasant but reserved. "My nephew tells me you arrived in town yesterday during the blizzard without proper clothing." "Yes, madam," Helena said, feeling like a child being scolded. "I made a poor decision to walk from the stage road, and I am very grateful that I made it to town safely. Your nephew was kind enough to lend me his coat." Miriam's eyes softened slightly at that. Carter has always been too generous for his own good, but in this case, I am glad he helped you. "Please sit down. Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please," Helena said, settling into the chair Miriam indicated. Carter remained standing by the door, his arms crossed over his chest, watching the exchange with interest. Miriam poured tea from a pot on the corner stove and handed Helena a delicate china cup. "Now then, Miss Norton, my nephew says you are looking for a room to rent. Can you tell me a bit about yourself and what brings you to Loveland?" Helena had prepared for this question, had practiced her answer during the long sleepless nights before she left Denver. "I am from Denver, madam. I worked there as a seamstress for several years, but I decided it was time for a change. I am hoping to find work here in Loveland and make a fresh start." "What kind of work are you hoping to find?" Miriam asked, sipping her own tea. "Loveland is a small town. We do not have as many opportunities as a city like Denver." "I am willing to do almost anything," Helena said honestly. "I can sew, as I mentioned. I can also cook, clean, work in a shop, teach children to read, or help with bookkeeping. I am a hard worker and I learn quickly." "Why did you leave Denver?" Miriam asked, and there was something in her tone that made Helena suspect the older woman already knew there was more to the story than a simple desire for change. Helena took a deep breath. She had promised herself she would not lie, but she also did not want to reveal everything. "I had a situation in Denver that became untenable. I needed to leave, and I needed to go somewhere where I could start over without the weight of the past following me." Miriam studied her for a long moment, and Helena forced herself to meet the older woman's gaze without flinching. Finally, Miriam nodded. "I appreciate your honesty, Miss Norton. I will not pry into your past, but I will tell you that if you are running from the law or from debts you cannot pay, I will not harbor you." "I am not running from the law," Helena said firmly, "and I have no debts. I left Denver of my own choice, and I have money to pay for my room and board until I can find work." "Can you sew?" Miriam asked abruptly. "Yes, madam. I worked for a dressmaker in Denver for 4 years. I can do alterations, make garments from patterns, and do fine embroidery work." Miriam's eyes lit up at that. "Show me your hands." Helena set down her teacup and held out her hands. They were not the soft, pale hands of a lady of leisure. Her fingers were calloused from years of needlework, and there were small scars from where she had pricked herself countless times. They were working hands, and she was not ashamed of them. Miriam took Helena's hands and examined them closely, turning them over to look at the calluses and scars. Then she nodded, satisfied. "These are the hands of a seamstress. Very well, Miss Norton. I will make you an offer. You may rent the room above my shop for $5 a month, including meals. In exchange, I expect you to help me with my sewing work 4 days a week. The other days are your own to do with as you please. If you prove yourself a skilled worker, I may offer you permanent employment and reduce your rent accordingly. Does that sound acceptable?" Helena felt tears of relief prick at her eyes. "More than acceptable, madam. Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," Miriam said dryly. "I am a demanding employer and I expect quality work. If you cannot keep up or if your work is substandard, I will ask you to leave. Is that understood?" "Yes, madam," Helena said. "I will not disappoint you." "Good. You can move in this afternoon if you like. Carter, help Miss Norton fetch her things from wherever she left them." "Her bag is still at the stage road," Carter said. "The driver probably took it back to the last station when he went for help. I can ride out there this afternoon and retrieve it if the roads are passable." "That would be very kind of you," Helena said. "Everything I own is in that carpet bag." Carter nodded. "I will bring it back by evening." He looked at his aunt. "Will you need anything else while I am in town?" "Just those dress buttons I ordered from Denver, if they have arrived at the post office," Miriam said. "And thank you for bringing Miss Norton to me, nephew. I think this arrangement will work out well for both of us." Carter tipped his hat to both women and left the shop, letting in a gust of cold air as he went. Helena watched him go, feeling a strange pang of disappointment that he had not stayed longer. She barely knew the man, but already she found herself thinking about him more than was probably wise. "My nephew is a good man," Miriam said, watching Helena's face with knowing eyes. "But he is also a man with responsibilities. His ranch takes up most of his time, and he has little patience for frivolous things." Helena felt her cheeks heat. "I was not thinking anything improper, madam." "I did not say you were," Miriam said mildly. "I am simply making an observation. Now, let me show you your room and we can discuss what kind of work I will need from you." The room above the dress shop was small but charming, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the main street of Loveland. It was clean and warm, and to Helena it looked like paradise. She ran her hand over the quilt on the bed, feeling the careful stitches, and felt a lump form in her throat. This was hers. Her own space, her own fresh start, her own chance at a new life. "The room is perfect," Helena said softly. "Thank you, Miss Olson." "Call me Miriam," the older woman said. "We will be working together, after all. And you should know that I am not an easy woman to please, but I am fair. If you work hard and do quality work, we will get along just fine." Helena spent the rest of the morning helping Miriam with alterations on a dress for one of the local women. Her fingers were stiff from the cold and the journey, but she fell back into the familiar rhythm of sewing with relief. This was something she knew how to do, something she was good at, and as she worked, she felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. She could make this work. She could build a life here in Loveland, away from the shame and scandal that had driven her from Denver. True to his word, Carter returned late that afternoon with her carpetbag slung over his shoulder and a package wrapped in brown paper under his arm. "Your bag was at the station in Berthoud," he said, handing it to Helena. "The driver had taken it back when he went for help, and here are your buttons, Aunt Miriam." "Thank you, Carter," Miriam said, taking the package. "Will you stay for supper? I am making stew." Carter hesitated, glancing at Helena. "I do not want to intrude." "You would not be intruding," Helena said quickly. "I would like to thank you properly for everything you have done for me, lending me your coat, helping me find a room, retrieving my bag. I am very grateful." "It was nothing," Carter said, but he looked pleased. "I suppose I could stay for a bit. The hands can manage without me for one evening." Supper was a simple but filling meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and canned peaches for dessert. Helena found herself relaxing as they ate, listening to Miriam and Carter talk about the ranch, the town, and the upcoming Christmas celebrations. She learned that Carter's parents had started the ranch 30 years ago, that his father had died 5 years earlier from a heart condition, and that his mother had remarried and moved to San Francisco, leaving the ranch to Carter. She learned that Miriam had never married, that she had moved to Loveland 10 years ago to be closer to her nephew, and that she was respected in town for her skill with a needle and her no-nonsense attitude. "What about you, Miss Norton?" Carter asked as Miriam served the peaches. "Do you have family back in Denver?" Helena's hand tightened on her spoon. "No. My parents both passed away several years ago. I have a brother, but we do not speak." "I am sorry to hear that," Carter said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Family estrangements are difficult." "Sometimes they are necessary," Helena said quietly. "Not all families are worth keeping." Miriam gave her a sharp look but did not comment. Instead, she changed the subject to the upcoming Christmas social at the church, and the moment passed. But Helena noticed that Carter was watching her with those blue eyes again, and she wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Did he see a woman with secrets? A woman running from something? Or did he simply see someone who needed help? After supper, Carter thanked his aunt for the meal and prepared to leave. Helena walked him to the door, still wearing his sheepskin coat. "I should return this to you," she said, starting to unbutton it. "Keep it," Carter said, stopping her with a hand on her arm. The touch was brief, but Helena felt it like a spark of electricity. "I told you I have another coat, and you need it more than I do. Consider it a loan until you can afford to buy your own." "I will pay you back," Helena said, "for the coat and for your kindness." "There is nothing to pay back," Carter said. "Welcome to Loveland, Miss Norton. I hope you find what you are looking for here." He left before she could respond, disappearing into the cold December night, and Helena stood at the door for a long moment, watching the snow fall and thinking about blue eyes and unexpected kindness. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and routine. Helena fell into the rhythm of life in Loveland, working alongside Miriam in the dress shop 4 days a week and using her free days to explore the town and get to know her neighbors. She attended church on Sundays and found the small congregation welcoming, if a bit curious about the newcomer. She made polite conversation at the general store, learned the names of the local families, and slowly began to feel like she might actually belong here. Carter came into town regularly for supplies, and he always stopped by the dress shop to check on Helena and his aunt. Helena found herself looking forward to his visits, even though they were brief and mostly consisted of small talk about the weather or the ranch. There was something solid and reassuring about Carter's presence, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a very long time. She was careful not to let her growing feelings show. The last thing she needed was to develop an attachment to a man, especially a man as upstanding and respected as Carter Olson. She had left Denver to escape the consequences of trusting the wrong man, and she was not about to make that mistake again. But she could not help the way her heart sped up when she heard his voice, or the way her eyes sought him out when he entered a room, or the way she treasured every small smile he gave her. Christmas came and went in a flurry of activity. Miriam kept Helena busy making dresses for the holiday social, and Helena threw herself into the work with determination. She attended the social at the church with Miriam, wearing a new dress she had made from fabric Miriam had given her as a Christmas gift. It was a deep blue wool that brought out the color in her eyes, and she had trimmed it with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She felt pretty for the first time in months, and when Carter asked her to dance, she felt like she was floating. "You look lovely tonight, Miss Norton," Carter said as he guided her around the floor in a simple waltz. "That dress suits you." "Thank you," Helena said, trying to ignore the way her pulse raced at his nearness. "Your aunt is a wonderful teacher. I have learned so much from her." "She speaks highly of you," Carter said. "She told me your work is some of the finest she has ever seen. That is not a compliment she gives lightly." Helena felt a warm glow of pride. "I have worked hard to prove myself. I am grateful she gave me a chance." "I am glad you came to Loveland," Carter said, and there was something in his voice that made Helena look up at him. His blue eyes were intent on her face, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. "I think you belong here." "I am starting to think so too," Helena whispered. The moment was broken by the end of the dance, and Carter escorted her back to where Miriam was standing with a group of other women. But Helena felt the warmth of his words all through the rest of the evening, and when she fell asleep that night, she dreamed of blue eyes and strong arms, and the possibility of something she had thought was lost forever. The new year brought brutal cold and heavy snows, and Loveland settled into the quiet hibernation of a Colorado winter. Helena had been in town for almost 2 months now, and she had begun to feel like a real part of the community. She had made friends with several of the local women, including Sarah Richardson, the wife of the rancher whose lights Helena had mistaken for Loveland on her first night. Sarah was a kind woman with 3 young children, and she had taken Helena under her wing, inviting her to Sunday dinners and introducing her to other families in the area. Through Sarah, Helena learned more about Carter and his ranch. She learned that he ran over 2,000 head of cattle on land that stretched for miles in every direction, that he employed over 20 ranch hands, and that he was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in the county. She learned that women had been trying to catch his attention for years, but that he had shown little interest in courting anyone. "He is married to that ranch," Sarah said with a laugh. "I swear, I have never met a man so dedicated to his work. He needs a good woman to make him remember there is more to life than cattle and horses." Helena tried not to think about what kind of woman would be good enough for someone like Carter Olson. She certainly did not think she qualified. She was a seamstress with a scandalous past, and no prospects beyond the small room above Miriam's dress shop. Carter could have his pick of any woman in the county, women with good families and clean reputations, and dowries to bring to a marriage. What could Helena possibly offer him except baggage and secrets? But despite her logical reasoning, Helena could not stop the way her heart lifted every time Carter came to town. She could not stop the way she found excuses to be in the front of the shop when she knew he was likely to stop by. She could not stop the way she saved her best smiles for him, and the way she treasured every small conversation they shared. It was early February when everything changed. Helena was in the shop alone, Miriam having gone to visit a friend who had taken ill, when the door burst open and Carter stumbled inside. His face was pale, his clothes were covered in blood, and he was supporting his right arm awkwardly against his chest. Helena dropped the dress she had been hemming and rushed to him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Bull got loose," Carter said through gritted teeth. "Gored one of my men pretty badly. I got him loaded into the wagon and brought him to the doctor, but the bull caught me with his horn before we got him secured. It is not too bad, just a deep gash on my arm." "You are bleeding heavily," Helena said, guiding him to a chair. "Let me see." Carter tried to wave her off. "The doctor is busy with my ranch hand. I just need to wait until he is finished." "You will bleed all over your aunt's shop if we wait that long," Helena said firmly. "Take off your coat and shirt. I can at least bind it until the doctor is ready to see you." Carter looked like he wanted to argue, but another wave of pain crossed his face and he nodded. Helena helped him out of his coat, and then carefully unbuttoned his flannel shirt, trying not to notice the hard muscle of his chest and shoulders, or the way her fingers trembled slightly as she worked. The wound on his upper arm was deep and ugly, still bleeding sluggishly, and Helena felt her stomach turn. "I need clean cloth and hot water," she said, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. She had helped her mother nurse sick neighbors when she was younger, and while she was no doctor, She knew the basics of cleaning and binding a wound. She worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the gash as best she could and binding it tightly with strips of clean linen. Carter watched her work, his jaw clenched against the pain, but he did not make a sound. When she was finished, Helena sat back and looked at him with concern. "You really should have the doctor look at it. It may need stitches." "I know," Carter said, "but thank you for this." "You have steady hands, Miss Norton." "My mother was a nurse during the war," Helena said, cleaning the blood from her own hands. "She taught me how to tend wounds. I am no expert, but I know enough to help in an emergency." "Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman," Carter said. "She was," Helena said softly. "I miss her every day." They sat in silence for a moment, and then Carter reached out with his uninjured hand and took Helena's. The gesture was so unexpected that Helena froze, staring down at their joined hands. "Thank you," Carter said again, his voice rough. "For helping me, for not making a fuss, for being here." Helena looked up and met his eyes, and what she saw there made her breath catch. There was pain, yes, but there was also something else. Something warm and deep and intense that made her heart pound. "I will always be here if you need me," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Carter's thumb rubbed gently across her knuckles, and for a wild moment, Helena thought he might lean forward and kiss her. But then the door opened and the doctor walked in, his sleeves rolled up and his face tired, and the moment was broken. "Carter, I heard you were injured as well," the doctor said. "Let me take a look at that arm." Helena reluctantly pulled her hand from Carter's and stepped back, watching as the doctor examined her bandaging work and nodded approvingly. "Good work here." "Who did this?" "Miss Norton," Carter said. "She is skilled with a needle and apparently with bandages as well." The doctor smiled at Helena. "You did well. The wound does need a few stitches, but you have stopped the bleeding and kept it clean. That is half the battle." He turned back to Carter. "Come with me. This will not take long." Carter stood, but he paused and looked back at Helena. "Will you still be here when I am done? I would like to talk to you." "Of course," Helena said. "I will be here." While Carter was with the doctor, Helena cleaned up the blood and water, her mind racing. The look in Carter's eyes, the way he had held her hand, the things he had not said but she had felt anyway, it all added up to something she had not expected and was not sure she was ready for. She cared for Carter, more than she should, more than was wise. But did she dare hope that he might care for her too? When Carter emerged from the back room, his arm properly stitched and bandaged, Helena was waiting with a fresh cup of coffee. He took it gratefully and sat down again, looking tired but less pale. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "How is your ranch hand?" Helena asked. "He will live, but it was close. The doctor says he will need several weeks to recover, and he may have a permanent limp. I will make sure he is taken care of." Carter took a sip of coffee and then set the cup down. "Miss Norton, Helena, I need to talk to you about something." Helena's heart began to pound. "All right." Carter seemed to struggle for words, which was unusual for him. He was normally so confident and direct. "I have been thinking a lot lately about the future. About the ranch and what I want my life to look like. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion." "What conclusion is that?" Helena asked, hardly daring to breathe. "That a ranch is not a home without someone to share it with," Carter said, looking directly at her. "I have been alone for a long time, Miss Norton. By choice, mostly. I have been focused on building up the ranch, on honoring my father's legacy, on being successful. But lately, I have realized that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with." Helena did not know what to say. She wanted to believe that Carter was saying what she thought he was saying, but she was afraid to hope. Carter continued, his voice earnest. "I know we have not known each other long, just a few months, but in that time I have come to admire you greatly." Your strength, your determination, your kindness, your skill with your hands and your good sense. You are not like the other women in town who have tried to catch my attention. You are real, Helena. You are genuine. And I find myself thinking about you far more than is probably appropriate. I think about you too, Helena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. More than I should. Carter smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. Then perhaps we are both guilty of the same crime. Helena, I would like to court you properly. I would like to take you driving, have you come out to the ranch for dinner, get to know you better. I know you have secrets, and I know you are running from something in Denver. I do not care about your past. I care about who you are now and who you might become. Will you give me a chance? Helena felt tears prick at her eyes. She had not expected this, had not dared to dream that a man like Carter Olson would want someone like her. But here he was, looking at her with hope and vulnerability in his blue eyes, asking for a chance. She knew she should tell him about Denver, about the scandal that had driven her away, about the man who had ruined her reputation with lies and manipulation. But the words stuck in her throat. She was too afraid that if she told him the truth, he would change his mind and walk away. Yes, she said instead. I would like that very much. Carter's smile widened and he reached for her hand again. This time, Helena did not hesitate. She placed her hand in his and felt the warmth and strength of his grip. And for the first time since leaving Denver, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The courtship began slowly, with propriety and care. Carter came to town every few days, always making sure to visit Helena at the dress shop. He brought her small gifts, a book of poetry, a pair of warm gloves, a pretty ribbon for her hair. He took her driving in his buggy on her days off, showing her the land around Loveland and pointing out landmarks. He was a perfect gentleman, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, and Helena found herself falling for him more deeply with each passing day. Miriam watched the courtship with approval, making it clear that she liked seeing her nephew happy. I have not seen Carter smile this much in years, she told Helena one afternoon as they worked on alterations. You are good for him, my dear. He has been too serious for too long. He is good for me too, Helena said honestly. I feel like I can breathe again, like I have a future worth looking forward to. Then hold on to that feeling, Miriam said, and do not let your past steal your future. Whatever happened in Denver, it is over now. You are here, and you have a chance at happiness. Do not throw it away because of fear or shame. Helena wondered if Miriam knew more than she was letting on, but she did not ask. Instead, she focused on the present, on the growing feelings between her and Carter, on the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, on the way her heart raced when he held her hand. It was late March, with the snow beginning to melt and the first hints of spring in the air, when Carter invited Helena out to his ranch for Sunday dinner. I want you to see my home, he said, the place I have built, the life I have made. I want you to meet my men and see the cattle and understand what my world is like. Helena agreed, both excited and nervous. Meeting Carter's ranch hands felt like a significant step, like he was introducing her to his family. She wore her best dress, the blue wool she had made for the Christmas social, and Miriam lent her a warm cloak for the drive. Carter picked her up in his buggy early Sunday morning, and they drove out of town and into the rolling foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The ranch was even more impressive than Helena had imagined. The main house was a sprawling two-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch and large windows that let in plenty of light. There were several outbuildings, barns, bunkhouses, a smokehouse, a chicken coop, all well maintained and organized. In the distance, Helena could see cattle grazing on the greening hillsides, and closer to the house, Horses moved in the corrals. "It is beautiful," Helena said as Carter helped her down from the buggy. "You have built something amazing here, Carter." "My father built most of it," Carter said modestly. "I have just tried to keep it going and expand where I can, but I am proud of it, yes. This ranch is my legacy, my life's work, and I want to share it with someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing." He showed her around the property, introducing her to his foreman and several of the ranch hands. They were all polite and respectful, tipping their hats and calling her Miss Norton, but Helena could see the curiosity in their eyes. The boss had never brought a woman out to the ranch before, and they were all wondering what this meant. Dinner was served in the large kitchen by the ranch cook, a gruff older man named Pete who had been with the Olson family for over 20 years. The food was simple but delicious: roast beef, potatoes, vegetables from the root cellar, and apple pie for dessert. Carter and Helena ate at the big kitchen table, and the conversation flowed easily as they talked about the ranch, the coming spring roundup, and Carter's plans for expanding his herd. After dinner, Carter took Helena into the front room, a comfortable space with a stone fireplace, leather furniture, and bookshelves lining the walls. "This is where I spend most of my evenings," he said. "Reading, going over accounts, planning for the next day. It is quiet and peaceful, and I can think here." Helena walked around the room, examining the books and the few personal items Carter had on display. There was a photograph of an older couple that she assumed were his parents, and another of a younger Carter standing with a beautiful horse. "You have made a real home here," she said. "It feels lived in and loved." "It feels empty," Carter said quietly. "I have everything a man could want: land, cattle, a successful business. But I come home every night to an empty house, and I eat my meals alone, and I have no one to share my successes or my troubles with. I have been telling myself for years that it was enough, that the ranch was enough. But it is not. Not anymore." He crossed the room to where Helena stood and took both of her hands in his. "Helena, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am not a young man anymore, and I do not have time to waste. I know what I want, and I want you. I want you here in this house, sharing this life with me. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build a family with you, a real family that fills this empty house with laughter and love. Will you marry me, Helena? Will you be my wife?" Helena's breath caught in her throat. This was everything she had dreamed of and everything she was afraid to want. She looked into Carter's blue eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and hope and love, and she wanted so badly to say yes. But she also knew that she could not marry him under false pretenses. She could not let him commit himself to her without knowing the truth about her past. "Carter, there is something I need to tell you first," she said, her voice shaking. "Something about why I left Denver. You deserve to know the truth before you make any promises you might regret." Carter's expression grew serious, but he did not let go of her hands. "All right, tell me." Helena took a deep breath and forced herself to meet his eyes. "I worked for a dressmaker in Denver named Mrs. Wallace. She was a good employer and I was happy there. But her nephew came to visit last summer and he took an interest in me. His name was Richard, and he was charming and handsome and said all the right things. I thought he cared for me. I thought he wanted to court me properly." She paused, swallowing hard. This was the difficult part, the part that filled her with shame even though she knew she had done nothing wrong. "He pursued me for months, brought me gifts, took me to dinner, promised me a future. I believed him. I trusted him. And then one night, he tried to force himself on me. I fought him off and ran, but the next day, he told everyone that I had tried to seduce him, that I had been inappropriate and forward. Mrs. Wallace believed him because he was her nephew. She fired me and told the other dressmakers in Denver not to hire me. Within a week, my reputation was destroyed. No one would give me work, and people whispered about me on the street. So I took my savings and left. I came here to start over, to escape the lies and the scandal. She finally looked up at Carter, expecting to see disgust or disappointment or doubt. But instead, she saw fury. Pure, cold fury that made his blue eyes burn like ice. "He tried to force himself on you," Carter said, his voice deadly quiet. "And when you fought him off, he destroyed your reputation to cover his own guilt." "Yes," Helena whispered. "I am sorry, Carter. I should have told you sooner. I understand if you do not want to marry me now. I am not exactly respectable." Carter pulled her into his arms so suddenly that Helena gasped. He held her tightly, one hand in her hair and the other around her waist, and she could feel the tension in his body. "You listened to me, Helena Norton," he said fiercely. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. That man is a coward and a villain, and if I ever meet him, I will make him regret the day he was born. You are the bravest, strongest woman I have ever met. You survived something terrible, and instead of letting it break you, you picked yourself up and started over. That takes courage. That takes character. And I will not hear you say you are not respectable. You are worth 10 of him and 100 of anyone who believed his lies." Helena felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for the first time, they were tears of relief rather than shame. "You still want to marry me?" "More than ever," Carter said, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "Helena, I do not care what happened in Denver. I do not care what lies that man told or who believed them. I care about you. The woman you are, the woman I have come to know and admire and love. Yes, love. I love you, Helena. I think I have loved you since that first night when I put my coat around your shoulders and saw the determination in your eyes. You were half frozen and completely alone, but you were not broken. You were fighting. And I knew then that you were someone special, someone worth knowing. Will you marry me? Please?" Helena looked up at the man who had shown her more kindness and understanding in a few months than most people had shown her in her entire life. She looked at his honest face and his strong hands and his loyal heart, and she knew that she loved him too, completely, irrevocably, with every part of herself. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Carter, I will marry you." Carter's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. "Helena,